Hi guys, I thought I'd make some videos about the espresso techniques that I use in cinema to control dynamic cars and trucks, and I'll also be showing you where you can go to get some free or reasonably priced cars and trucks that you can use to animate in your movies. Okay, well this is a free model and it's a Mini Cooper and it's Creative Commons license, which means you can use it in any of your scenes as long as you give credit to the artist. Now I've got this Mini rigged up with motors and suspension and all that kind of stuff, and I've got a little control panel at the bottom right with some espresso sliders. So let's hit play and let's see him in action. Okay, well as you can see the car steers to the right and I can steer him to the left. I can whack him into reverse. I can make him go slow or fast. Alright, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Now I've got a movie here and you can see this little Mini in action. Okay, I've got 4 mini cars here and they're all having this kind of a race across some bumpy terrain, and these cars are all steering themselves. They've got this kind of automated system that I'll be showing you later on where you can kind of choreograph a race like this, and these cars, they're all running under dynamics and steering themselves. You know, they're not on splines or anything, so that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Okay, now this free Mini, I'll show you where you can go to get your hands on it. You go to this site here, I don't know how you pronounce this, it's OYONALE, I think the guy's French. Anyway, it's OYONALE.com, and you go through the menu down to Cinema 4D models, then you scroll down and here's the Mini Cooper, and it's a C4D file, and like I said, it's Creative Commons license, so you can use it to your heart's content. Now another place that I go for free models is this place called DMI-3D.net, and they've got loads of stuff. Now some of these models are Lightwave objects, that is .lwo, but Lightwave will open in cinema, so that's okay to download them, and they've got some free stuff and some paid for stuff I think, but I just use their free models. And I've used a police car from their series of emergency vehicles. I've also used this blue truck, this Freightliner truck, and they're not bad models for nothing. In fact, I can show you those 2 models in cinema. Here's the Renault police car, and I've got this car all rigged up as well, so if I just hit play you can see what it looks like. So there you go, the cops are chasing some bad guys. Okay, so that's the Renault police car, and that big Freightliner rig. Where are we? Here we go, Freightliner. Yeah. Now the trailers, usually when you go to any site, the trailers are usually a separate piece of download. So you get the tractor unit and you get the trailer, then you've got to put them together yourself. But like I said, this is a free model, but it's not bad for nothing. So let's just hit play. And here we go. Now these big rigs, they're a load of fun to drive and to animate around it. Just drive them around your viewport. You can have hours of fun just driving these fellas around. And the best thing about these big rigs is you can practice your reversing. So I'm just going to put this fella in reverse. And if you think you know all about reversing a trailer, I can assure you it's a lot harder than you think. Okay, in fact, I've got a movie clip of some other trucks here. Let's see if I can find that. Okay, now these big rigs, these are from a place called Dosh Design. Now you got to pay for these trucks, but they are very high quality and they're quite easy to get rigged up and driving them through a city. This is the Grayscale Gorilla City. This is another bit of gear you've got to pay for. But the trucks are really nice from Dosh Design. I'll just show you where you go to get them. Where are we? Dosh Design. Yeah, so you go to these guys, Dosh Design, and you fork out about $150 or 120 euros, and you get a bundle of about 16 trucks and vans and all kind of stuff. And I like their big trucks especially. They're really nice. There's an 18-wheeler. So yeah, so that's where I get my gear from. So let's have a look at some espresso now. Okay, well this is the first thing we'll be making. It's just a little car made out of primitives, and the car's got motors and suspension and steering, and I've got some espresso that controls all those things. So at this point you're probably thinking, well, why are we bothering with this stupid cube car? Let's get stuck into those nice models. Let's get that free Mini and rig him up with dynamics and steering. Well, there's a very good reason why we're going to be starting with a primitive car, so maybe a little explanation is in order. Okay, so we're back with our Mini Cooper, and a mistake that a lot of people make the first time they try to apply dynamics to a nice model like this is to think that all you got to do is to hang a dynamics tag on the car body, then you just make the wheels dynamic, then you get some wheel suspension units and some motors and what have you, just hook everything up, and you think, well, that's it, I'll just press play and the thing will drive around the scene. Well, you might just get away with that if you've got like a low definition, low polygon model, but with a car like this that's very detailed, and as you can see there's a very large number of polygons in this vehicle. If you start applying dynamics to all those polygons, you're heading for a big disappointment. Now let me show you what happens if you do this the wrong way around. Okay, well here's the same car, and with this car I've got the same power going to the motors, and I've got everything's identical apart from the fact that I've applied the dynamic tags straight to the polygons of the body, and the dynamic tags had also been applied to the wheels, the high poly wheels. Okay, so let's see what happens with this car when I've done it incorrectly, when it's all rigged incorrectly. So I'll hit play. And as you can see, it's going at about 1 frame a second. Now if you had, say, half a dozen cars like this in your scene, your work would just grind to a halt. You'd never get anything done. So that's the wrong way to do it. Okay, now for the correct way to rig this Mini with dynamics. You see, underneath the car that we're looking at, there's another car that's just made out of primitives. This is just a cube and some cylinders. Now this is where you're going to hang all the dynamic stuff like rigid body tags, wheel suspension, motors, etc. This is going to be the dynamic car that drives around the scene, and all the high polygon stuff just comes along for the ride. And because this is just made out of primitives, this dynamic car can drive around the scene as fast as you want, and it's not going to be encumbered by the polygons that's in the high poly model, because these don't take part at all in the dynamics. Now the way you make the real car follow around the proxy car correctly is you make all these various components children of their respective parts in the dynamic car. So for instance, you'd make the car body of this Mini a child of the dynamic car body, and you make all of the high poly wheels, each wheel would be a child of its counterpart in the dynamic model. And then when you've got all the parent-child relationships sorted out, you just do a bit of hiding and revealing in the object manager. Now I'm doing it with an espresso switch here so I can demonstrate it. But if you look in this object manager, you can see the traffic lights are changing when I switch from one to the other. So you just do a bit of intelligent hiding and revealing, and you end up with a car that drives as fast as a primitive car would, but it's actually a load of polygons that's driving around the scene. And that is basically how you do it. Now the body of this dynamic proxy car hasn't got to be exactly the same size and dimensions as the body of the high poly car. It's just got to be approximately the same so that it'll handle correctly when it's bouncing around your scene. But the wheels have got to be exactly the same dimensions, because the wheels are going to be touching the ground. And also in a movie, people tend to like look at the wheels because they're turning around. People tend to focus on the wheels, so the wheels have got to be bang on correct. So they've got to be in the exact same position, they've got to be the same dimensions. But once you've got all that sorted out, you end up with a car that drives nice and fast like this one does. And to all intents and purposes, it's the polygons that's doing the driving. But we know that underneath this car, all there is another car. And that's how it all works. And if you compare this car speeding around this scene, and look how nippy it is, how we can control it, it goes as fast as we want. If you compare this to that other car that we were just looking at that was rigged up incorrectly, I think you'll agree with me that this is the wrong way to do it. And the other way is the correct way to do it. So there you go. That's the secret of rigging a car. So let's get started making some primitive espresso cars. Okay, so we're going to need a cube for the body, and this cube is going to be 100 by 50 by 260. Renaming body. Let's give him a nice bright colour. Okay, now we want some cylinders for the wheels. These are going to be in the X orientation, and I'm going to make them 30 radius and 30 height. Now I always give my wheels a checkerboard material so that I can make sure they're rotating correctly. Surface is checkerboard. Okay, rename that wheel, and I'm going to need another 3, so I'll go Control click. Now let's look at this from the top down view. I'm going to turn on snapping, and I want work plane snap and grid point snap. Okay, and I want front left wheel snapping into place, front right, rear left, and rear right. Okay, now I need some wheel suspension connectors. So I'll go simulate dynamic connector, and I don't want a hinge, I want wheel suspension. Let's just hide the body for a moment and check the orientation of this connector. As you can see, the axis is going front to back, and I want it to go left to right. So let's get the rotate tool, spin this fella around 90 degrees. Okay, rename that wheel suspension. And I'm going to need 4. 3, 4. Okay, now these wheel suspension units, they've got to be located at the centre of the wheel, of the respective wheel. So let's look at this from the top down view. First wheel suspension unit is going to be there. I've still got snapping turned on. And the front right suspension, rear left suspension, and the rear right suspension. Okay, now these suspension units have got 2 fields, Object A and Object B. Object A is going to be the body, and Object B is the respective wheel. Now since Object A is the same for all these units, I can do them all at once. Click body, then go through them one at a time. First one to wheel, second one to wheel.1, third one to wheel.2, and the fourth one to wheel.3. Now I'm going to group these objects to make the object manager a bit more tidy. So Alt G, call that one wheels, and do the same for the suspension. Alt G, rename that suspension. Okay, let's look at this from the side view. Now this doesn't look much like a car at the moment because everything's on the same level, so I'm just going to raise the body up a little bit. Okay, now I can drop those 2 nulls into the body so that everything moves together. Okay, so I suppose this is a good time to make stuff dynamic, because at the moment they're just primitive objects, they won't do anything, they won't fall under gravity or move around correctly. So what I need is to right click the body, go simulation tag, rigid body. A rigid body means it falls under gravity. Do the same for the wheels. Simulation tag, rigid body. Now since these wheels are in a null, I've got to click apply to children. Here we are, inherit tag, apply tag to children. That means that all these wheels now are affected by that dynamics tag. Okay, so I think we could do with a floor, otherwise if I just click play, everything's going to fall into into the abyss. So once a floor, now I usually hide the floor because we don't really need to see it, but the floor's got to be dynamic as well, but it's not going to be a rigid body. The floor's going to be a collider body, because we don't want the floor to drop, we just want it to sit there and react with the other stuff. So simulation tag, collider body. Okay, now for the moment of truth. Let's press play and see what happens. Well, it looks to me like the wheel suspension is not quite stiff enough. So we go into the suspension. I can do all these at the same time because they all need to have the same value. At the moment the stiffness is set to 1, so let's just make it 10 and see what happens. That's a bit more like it. Let's look at it from the side view. Yeah, that'll do for now. We can always tweak it a bit later if required. Okay, well now we need some motors, so we go simulate dynamics motor. And as you can see, the axis of this motor is going front to back and it needs to be going left to right to drive the wheels correctly. So grab the rotate tool and spin it around by 90 degrees. Okay, now this is going to be a 4-wheel drive car, so I'm going to make 3 copies of this motor and put them in a null, Alt-G, rename it motors. Now these motors don't have to be located on the wheel that they're driving. The motors have to be located at the centre of the car body. So I'm just going to tuck this motors null into the body, make it a child, and then I can just zero out the coordinates. Let's double check from the side view. Yep, the motors are all at the centre of the body. Okay. Now these motors have got 2 fields, object A and object B, just like the suspension units. And object A is going to be the body, and object B is going to be the wheel that it's driving. So, do all the object A's at one go. Body, and the first motor drives the first wheel, and motor.1 drives wheel.1, and motor.2 is going to be driving wheel.2, and motor.3 is going to be driving wheel.3. Okay, well let's hit play and see what happens. Well, it kind of works, but still needs a bit of tweaking. The problem is that these motors have got the wrong kind of values to drive this particular model. The default values are a bit wrong for us. Now I know from experience that we need something like 500 in the target speed and 500 in the torque field. That should get us rolling, I think. So let's hit play. Well, that moves the car, but I don't know if you can see this, the wheels are spinning. The first few frames, the wheels are spinning. Let's just look at this from the side view. I'll highlight one of the wheels and just go one frame at a time. Now as that wheel hits the deck, you can see that the wheel is spinning before the car moves. We can soon remedy that by cranking up the friction of the wheels and the friction of the floor. So I can do that, do them both together. I grab the floor dynamic tag and the wheels dynamic tag. I'm just going to crank this value up to 300. Okay, let's hit play and see what happens. Haha! Okay, well that's the first part of this job done. What we've got to do now is get some espresso going to drive this fella. Okay, so I'm going to make a null, rename it espresso, and right click and give it an espresso tag. Okay, now this opens up the espresso editor window. I don't need that just for now, so let's drag it to one side. I'm going to make another null and call this one control. Now this is where I'm going to hang all my sliders for speed, steering, etc. So let's do the speed first. With control highlighted, I'm going to go user data, manage user data, and click add data, rename it speed. Tab down. You don't want to hit enter, by the way, when you're filling these fields in, because it'll just close the window. So I tabbed down Now data type, there's all sorts of weird and wonderful data types you can have in this interface, but I'm just going to leave it at float. And the interface I want is a slider. Okay, now for the units, if you remember when we first looked at these motors, when I said they weren't set to the right values, the values I was putting in the interface here was degrees per second. Now in the Espresso editor window, we don't really use degrees, we use radians. And at 1 radian is about 57 degrees. So if you do a bit of mental arithmetic, you can come to the conclusion that the kind of values we're going to need down here to drive the car, we're going to be using values about 10, 20, 30, that sort of number. So I'm going to go unit real, which just means a regular number again. And for the minimum and maximum, I'm going to go minimum 0, maximum say 50. That should be plenty to drive this little car. Okay, so that's the speed. Now let's just have a look on our control panel and check that we've got a slider. Yep. Okay, so we can drag the Espresso window back, and I can drag the control null into this window. Now, if you've ever done Espresso before, it's not too difficult to comprehend. The left-hand side of these nodes is the inputs, and the right-hand side is the outputs. Now, since this control panel is going to be giving us a value, we're going to need an output to come from this node. So on the right-hand side, go all the way down to the bottom, user data speed, and that's a little slider that we've just made. Okay, well this speed is going to be driving the motors, so let's drag the motors in one at a time. And the value, again this is going to be on the left hand side because this is an input. The value we're looking to drive here is angular target speed. Okay, I can drag another one in. Angular target speed. By the way, if you can't see all the words in the node, just hold down Control and double click the title bar, and it optimizes it. And a quick way to fill the other two motors in here is just to Control click them, make a copy and another copy. Now I can just drag the name of motor 2 onto there and motor 3 onto there. Okay, so that's the 4 motors, so what we've got to do now is hook up the speed, and hopefully this should drive our car. We should be able to control the speed with our little slider. Right, so let's check him out. Let's zoom out a bit. Start off at a low value. Oh, probably need a few more frames. 500 should do it. Okay, hit play, and it kind of goes slow, then it goes fast, then it goes really fast. I think we can safely say that that's working for now. Might need to tweak a few values later on, but okay, well that's the speed sorted out. Now let's have a look at the steering. Now I'm just going to be steering the front 2 wheels, obviously. In fact, since this car looks a bit symmetrical, I think I've got a little graphic here that I made in Photoshop. It's just an arrow. I'm going to drop this arrow onto the car body so we can see that it's going in the correct direction. So I'll just drag the arrow onto the body. I don't want it on all the sides, so I can go, let's see, untick tile. I want flat. I use this so infrequently that I always forget exactly how to do this, but so bear with me for a minute. I just tweak that so it's a bit more 90 degrees, yep. And just a little bit more tweaking, I think. Okay, now we've got an arrow so we can see which way our car is going. Right, where was I? Forgot what I'm doing now. Oh yeah, steering. Yeah, I'm going to steer these front 2 wheels. So the thing that we're going to be driving is going to be on the wheel suspension units. On these wheel suspension, down here in the interface, there's something called steering angle. Now again, this is in degrees, and we're going to be using radians in our Espresso window, so bear that in mind. But this is what we need to be driving, is steering angle. Okay, so let's go back to our control panel. Manage user data. Going to add another field now. This one is going to be called steer. In fact, I'll put steer left hyphen right. Tab down. Okay, data type, yeah. I'm going to leave it all as is actually. I'm going to leave it a percentage, but I'm going to make this minus 100%, so it's going to be full lock one way, full lock the other way. Okay, that should do it. Oh, I want it to be a slider, obviously, float slider. So that should do, so we're going from minus 100% to plus 100%, with default at 0. Okay, so that's the steering slider. Let's just have a look at our little interface. Yeah, that should do for steering. So all we've got to do now is drag the relevant stuff into the window. Let's move these out of the way a little bit. Okay, so it's wheel suspension, and it's going to be object properties. Here we go, steering angle. And I want the second one in as well. Steering angle. Okay, and the value we're going to be driving it with is going to be the other user. Here we are, steer left right. Okay, so that's the output that's going to be driving these. But at the moment, this is in percentages, and I need to be changing this, need to be converting it to some kind of sensible value to drive these steering angles. Now, if you remember, I said that the steering angle is going to be in radians in this window, but it's in degrees in the interface. Now, a radian is about 57 degrees. So I usually work with a ballpark figure of half a radian left and half a radian right. That means that the wheels are going to be on full lock one way about 30 degrees and about 30 degrees the other way on the other lock. So about half a radian is the kind of ballpark number I want to be feeding into here. So I've got to convert these plus and minus 100% to plus and minus half a radian. And I could do this several ways, but there's actually a node which does this kind of conversion, does it all for you, and it's called the range mapper. So I'm going to right click in the window. This comes under calculate because it's mathematics. Where are we? Range mapper. Okay, and it does what it says on the tin. It maps one range to another range. So with that range mapper highlighted, we can just go into the interface here. Now, input lower, if you remember, we were working with percentages, so it was input lower was minus 100 on our slider. Input upper is plus 100, that's okay. And then for the outputs, we're going to have minus half a radian and plus 0.5 of a radian. Okay, well, let's just connect this up and see what happens. There's only two chances, it'll work or it won't. Okay, so that's the steering hooked up. Now let's just pull back a bit so we can see what's going on a bit better. Right, control panel, speed's a reasonable kind of speed, so let's just hit play and see what happens. Right, so I'm going to steer to the left, and he steers to the right, and I'm going to steer to the right, and he goes to the left. Now I wonder why that's going the wrong way around. Well, there's a very simple explanation actually. If you look at this from the top-down view, now you've got to have a convention of some kind for what is left and what is right. So the way Cinema does it is that angles to the left are considered positive and angles to the right are considered negative. And at the moment we've got it the wrong way around. We've got minus 100% is given us a negative value. It needs to give us a positive value. So there's two ways we can achieve this. We can go into the range mapper, and I could just change this minus 0.5 and plus 0.5. I could swap those over, or I could just check the reverse button here. And if I hit reverse, it'll just do what we've set up down here, but it'll do it the other way about. So let's check that and see if it does what I want. Okay, control panel, let's make it go a bit faster. Okay, and we're off, and let's steer to the left. Fantastic, and steer to the right. Let's go faster. Yeah, brilliant. Left and right. Okay, now you might think, well, that's it, we've just about nailed this little car, but there's still a couple of things we need to do. Okay, we're going to reset the steering back to 0 so it's on straight ahead. And let's just zoom in and have a close look at this little fella. Okay, well at the moment, if I set him off rolling with the steering on straight ahead, and then I do some steering, everything seems to work okay. But if I start off the animation from frame 0 when the steering is not on straight ahead, just watch what happens. Keep your eye on those front wheels. As you can see, the front wheels go all wibbly wobbly. Now that's not a good look. The thing is, you see, with this dynamic animation, the wheels have got to be on straight ahead at the beginning of the animation. Then you can steer them whichever way you want. Now obviously you could keep resetting back to straight ahead every time you wanted to fiddle around with your little scene. But the best way to solve this problem of the wheels being on straight ahead at the animation start is just to add a little bit of espresso. So the espresso I'm going to add to this scene is I'm going to say that for the first 5 frames of the animation, that should give the car a chance to settle down. For the first 5 frames, the steering is going to be on straight ahead. Then after 5 frames, it can be whatever we've got it set on. So it's just going to automate this setting the steering to 0 business. And here's how you do that. Okay, now I want to know what frame we're on first of all. That's the first little problem. How do I know when I'm on frame 1, 2, 3, etc.? The way you find out what frame you're on is to go under General, and right down here we've got something called Time. Now this time node, that by default it does actually give you the time in seconds of your animation. So say when you're on 90 frames, this would give us a value of 3 seconds. I don't want time, I want frames. So I'm going to right click and delete that. I want frame. Okay, now this is going to output the number 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. as the animation is running. And I want to test when this frame is greater than 5 so that the regular steering can take over. So to do that, I right click, and under the heading Logic, there's something called Compare. And compare, it just compares one value to another. Now there's loads of different ways you can compare things. You can have equal to, less than, greater than, not equal to, etc. I'm just going to go for greater than. Now, so I don't forget what I've set this to, I'm going to rename it as well. I'm going to compare greater than 5, so I can remember what I've set it to, and it changes the name in the window as well. Okay, so it's going to be greater than 5. And when it's greater than 5, it gives us a true as opposed to a false. So let's just have a look at this now before we go any further. I'm just going to hang a result node on here. Right click under General, where are we? Right down the bottom, Result. Okay, so this will just tell me what is coming out of that node. By the way, I normally have this setting up here, Calculate. I always have this on Animation Refresh. If you don't have this checked, your window doesn't update in real time, but if you have that Animation Refresh turned on, your window refreshes on the fly, so to speak. Okay, so at the moment it's showing 0, which is false because the frame is less than 5. So I'm just going to go through this one frame at a time. So on frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, frame 4, frame 5, frame 6, it gives us a true, and it gives us a true for forevermore. Okay, so how can we use this 0, 1 and 1 to control our little wobbly wheel problem? Okay, well this compare node, it's usually coupled up with its little brother down here, condition. And what condition does is that you put a value into the switch port, and if you put a 0 in, it will feed whatever's on the first input through to the output. If you put a 1 on the switch, it will feed the second value to the output. And you can actually add more inputs to this if you want. You can have 5 inputs, you can have as many inputs as you like. But at the moment, 2 will suffice, because if I put this switch on here, and if I say that when this is greater than 5, the second output will be fed through. But before 5, up to 5, the first output will be fed through. Sorry, the first input will be fed through. I just set the first input to 0 and I can feed this other one via this node. Oops, do that again. Just try and tidy this up a bit so it's easy to see. Okay, so what happens now is that up to frame 5, 0 will be fed through to the steering, and after frame 5, whatever the steering is set on will be fed through. So let's just check this little experiment. Got my control, got it set on. Let's put him on full lock. Let's go crazy and test him on full lock. Okay, so I'm going to set the animation rolling, and the wheels should be on straight ahead for the first 5 frames, and then whatever the steering is set to will take over. And there we go. No wobbly wheels at all. Let's just check it on the other look to make sure. Okay, so I think we've nailed that steering business. Okay, now I'm going to put an elementary gearbox into my control panel. I'm just going to have 3 buttons for reverse, stop and forward, just so I can make my car go forwards and backwards. And the interface I'm going to have is going to look a bit like these buttons here. And in user data, these buttons are known as quick tab radio for some reason. So here we go, control, manage user data, add data. I'm going to call this gears, tab down. Now to use this quick tab radio, the data type has got to be integer. Okay, data type integer. Then for the interface we want quick tab radio. Now this quick tab radio, it's got something called syntax. That just means you've got to type something into this window. And the syntax is the value you want the button to output when it's clicked, semicolon followed by the word that you want to appear on the button. Now I'm going to have 3 buttons marked reverse, stop and forward. So I'm going to go 0, semicolon, reverse, new line, 1, semicolon, stop, new line, 2, semicolon, forward. Okay, and this is what it's going to look like. So just double check everything's correct. Oh yeah, I'm just going to drag this to the top of the interface because I don't need the gears on the bottom. The steering is going to be the important part of this little scene. Okay, so I've got my gears at the top now, and there we have it. We've got our 3 buttons. Okay, so let's get our Xpresso window open and see how we can fit this into the mathematics. Right, well, my plan is this. I'm going to put another node. I'm going to intercept the line going from the speed to the angular target speed of the motors, where I can multiply the speed value by either -1 for reverse, for 0 for stop, and +1 for forwards. So I need to break these connections here and put a couple more nodes in here. So I need an output from my control panel, the gears. I'll just drag this to the top. Okay, now this gears, let's just double check the gears is actually giving us the correct value. So I'll hang a result on here. Okay, now let's just click through. So reverse is giving us a 0, stop is giving us a 1, and forward is giving us a 2. Okay, now I'm going to use that 0, 1 and 2 to drive 3 inputs from a condition node. So I'm going to control click this one to make a copy, add another input. Now these 3 inputs are going to be selected by 0, 1 and 2. So the 3 inputs on here are going to be -1 for reverse, 0 for stop obviously, and +1 for forward. Okay, so the gears is going to drive that. And then I'm going to have to multiply the speed value by whatever comes out of this node. So right click under calculate math. And we'll change the function to multiply. So this value is going to be multiplying the speed. Hook that up to the angular target speed, and hopefully we should have a 3-speed gearbox. By the way, if you wanted like a 4-speed or 5-speed gearbox or whatever, you could have, say, 3 or 4 forward gears. Just add more inputs on here, and then on your gear selector you'd have first, second, third or top. whatever. You can have as many inputs as you want on these condition nodes. But for now, I'm just going to have reverse, stop and forward. Okay, let's have a look at this. Let the dog see the rabbit, as we used to say. Got him on stop. Let's put him on forward. Let's hit play. Forward, stop, reverse. We're steering. Well, this is looking good. This is looking good so far. There's just a couple of things that we need to tweak for this, though. I'll show you what the problem is, then I'll show you the solution. Okay, let's imagine we've got this was a real car, you know, say we'd married this fella up to a nice model of a car, like a Mini or something, and our little Mini was going to come to a road junction. It was going to stop and wait for the traffic or the lights to change. Then the car was going to set off. Well, let's just simulate that with our gearbox here, because if you look here, this little symbol here means that these are all animatable, so I could control click these values and have them changing along as the timeline progresses. But I'm just going to do it manually for now. Okay, here we go. The car sets off and it stops at the road junction and it waits and it waits. Oh, it's quite busy today. Oh, traffic's clear, let's go forward. So we hit play and look, the engine's stalled. So what's going on here? Why won't it go after we've stopped it? Why won't it go? It was going okay at the beginning of the animation. Okay, what's going on here is that to make life simple in a dynamic scene, any dynamic scene you care to mention, Cinema has this system whereby if something stops and doesn't move for about 2 seconds, if it doesn't move for 2 seconds, it ceases to be dynamic until, say, something else bangs into it or something happens in the scene. But if you just got an object that just stops for 2 seconds, it ceases to be dynamic. Now, the way you can get around this is quite simple. If you look on the, let's look at the wheels first. On the wheels dynamic tab on the top of the dynamics tag here, this one here, dynamics, where it says linear velocity threshold, what's actually going on in this scene is that when the speed drops below 10 centimeters a second, or the angular velocity drops below this value, that's when it ceases to be dynamic. So if I just change these values to 0, obviously you can't go less than 0. So if I change these values to 0, and I'll do the same for the body, it's probably not essential, I'll do the same to the body as well. That means that when the vehicle stops, although its speed is dropping below 10, it's not going to drop below 0. Like I said, you can't drop below 0. So let's see what happens now. So I'll start off on stop. I'm so confident I'm going to leave the thing stopped for the first few seconds. Okay, well, that's about 4 seconds, so we'll hit play, forward, and then we'll stop again. And stop for about 5 seconds. Let's hit reverse now. So as you see, our car now is it can stop, it can go forwards, it can steer. In fact, you know, I think we've just about nailed this little vehicle. So like I said, you can keyframe these values, so you could actually use this little model for some kind of animation as it stands. But in the next video, I'm going to be showing you how to make this fella up with a nice high poly model of, I don't know, a Mini or some kind of a car or other. We're going to be marrying this fella up to a nice high poly, good looking model and driving it around the scene. But for now, let's just have a play with this gearbox and the steering. Okay, so that's it. So I hope I haven't rambled on too long, and I hope you've learnt a bit about Espresso. Okay, right, I'll catch you in the next video.